Manuela again for the talk.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you.
Very challenging work, I have to say. And with this, I would say we move on to our next speaker, Dr. Balaram Dey from Vancouver University in India.
No, I don't know how I cannot share it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, and Balaram is talking to us about Jacobi shape transitions and clustering effects in light nuclei. And in the moment, Manuela has unshared. Okay. Balaram, with this, I would say the stage is yours.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's nicely to be seen.
Okay. Am I audible clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Nico Orse and the organizing committee for such nice gathering and giving me the opportunity to present one of my research work. So the title of my presentation is Jacobi shape transitions and clustering effect in light nuclei. So let me first introduce about the topic Jacobi shape transitions. Just a minute. I cannot. Okay. So the Jacobi shape transitions, a long time ago, in 1884, Jacobi, he predicted that a rotating gravitational object like a rotating star, it changes its shape from non-collective oblate to collective prolate or elongated triaxial shape, which is known as the Jacobi shape transition. So it was predicted for the rotating gravitational celestial object. And let me show a short video to make it clear how the shape transition is. So it is basically, you can see that if the angular frequency is increasing, angular velocity is increasing, then the spherical object goes from spherical to non-collective oblate. And then at a particular angular momentum, which is known as the critical angular momentum for this subject, it will change the axis of rotation. So that is basically the collective rotations. And you can see that after some time, just here. So it can changes its shape from non-collective oblate to collective prolate. So collective prolate means the axis of rotation is perpendicular to the symmetry axis. So obvious the question is that whether such kind of elongated deformations or such kind of shape transitions can be seen in quantum many-body systems like atomic nuclei. And if yes, then how do you see this phenomenon in the nuclear system? So in order to investigate this kind of shape transitions, generally we have to use such a technique which can directly probe the nuclear shape degrees of freedom. And I will be discussing about this giant dipole resonance, which is one of the important experimental technique which can directly probe the nuclear shape degrees of freedom, and therefore can be used to study this kind of shape transitions. So let me first introduce about this giant resonance. Then I will move to on my topic. So the giant resonance, as you know, that the nuclear excitations is one of the important experimental technique by which one can understand the nucleus, what is nucleus, what's the nucleons are doing inside the nucleus, and various nuclear properties, and so on. And there are mainly two kind of nuclear excitations there: the single particle excitations and collective excitations. And we know that excited nuclei that can decay through different particles like alpha, proton, neutron, and gamma emissions, depending on the available excitation energy. And these emitted particle carrying the information about the nucleus, nuclear properties. And if we detect those particles by suitable detector system, then easily we can understand the nucleus. Now let us see the response of an atomic nucleus as a function of energy. This is a typical schematic diagram. If we increase the energy, then you can see that at low energy, there are mainly the discrete levels are observed, and these discrete levels is basically due to the single particle excitation, where one or few nucleon participate in this kind of excitations. But as you go to the higher energy, you can see that a broad resonance is observed. And this broad resonance in the energy range of 10 to 25 MeV, you can see that this broad resonance, this is basically known as the giant resonance. And this is a collective vibration of nucleons inside the nucleus, which is nicely discussed just in the previous presentation. And depending on the different multipolarity, spin, isospin, quantum numbers, these giant resonance can be classified into different categories like monopole, dipole, and quadrupole. And there are different modes like isoscalar and isovector. But I will be mainly focusing on this giant dipole resonance and how we can use this giant dipole resonance to study to investigate the Jacobi shift transitions. So here I have shown some experimental observation of giant dipole resonance. So giant dipole resonance is this GDR can be studied of various nuclei built on ground state as well as the excited state. So this GDR, it's a small amplitude, high frequency and highly damped collective oscillation between neutron and protons. And as it is highly damped, this resonance can decay through high energy gamma rays in the typically in the energy range of 10 to 25 MeV. And if we detect those high energy GDR gamma rays, so this is the typical high energy gamma ray spectrum for GDR built on excited state. And as you can see that here a bump is riding over this exponentially decaying spectrum. And this bump is basically the signature of that the detector system detects some high energy gamma rays which are not following the exponential decaying spectrum. So if we extract this bump by using the statistical model calculations, then we'll have this kind of typical Lorentzian GDR strength functions, GDR line shape, which is mainly characterized by the centroid energy and width of the resonance and the strength parameter. So now, what we can see, what we can investigate by using the GDR as an important tool. So GDR, its centroid energy, it is proportional to inversely proportional to the 1 by r, the radius of the dimension of the nucleus. So one can study the size of the nucleus. And the GDR line shape it as this is the tool which we have used to study the Jacobi shift transition. So here you can see that for the different kind of nucleus, spherical, oblate, prolate, and triaxial like this. So there are different kind of line shapes are there. So if we populate a nucleus at different angular momentum or different temperature, then one can study the shape transitions by looking on these GDR line shapes. And on the other hand, this width of the resonance that can give the damping mechanism of the collective vibrations, or how this damping mechanism is affected as a function of temperature, how it behaves as a function of temperature and angular momentum. We can study the shape transitions. Even we can extract the nuclear deformations from the GDR width at high excitation energy. And very recently, the GDR can also be used as a fingerprint of alpha clustering. I will be talking on this GDR as a fingerprint of alpha clustering in my presentations. And very recently, we have also extracted experimentally the eta by S ratio to understand the nuclear fluidity, which has been published in PRL. And we have seen that the measured eta by S from our GDR measurement from VCC group at Kolkata, that eta by S values are comparable to that of the high temperature quark-gluon plasma, that pointing towards the fact that the strong fluidity may be the universal feature of the strong interaction of many wave systems. Okay, so here is my topic that let us see what is the experimental signature of Jacobi shift transitions. So before we start this topic, I should tell you that to investigate the Jacobi shift transitions, the nucleus has to be populated at very high angular momentum. There is some critical angular momentum beyond which this Jacobi shift transition is observed, right? So at that high angular momentum, the nucleus is rotating as well as vibrating. So that is GDR vibration. So it is expected to have some rotational effect on this GDR vibration frequency. So I am not able to discuss the details how this rotational effect on the GDR vibration frequency because of the short time. So if you are interested, then you can see this reference. So these GDR vibrations, which are perpendicular to the rotational axis, and that will split due to the Coriolis effect or that rotational effect, and giving rise to altogether 5 GDR components. Let me give you an example. This is a nice presentation by Professor Adam Mai, who is the pioneer in this GDR field, this Jacobi and GDR field. So I've taken that presentation from his slide. So let us take a prolate nucleus. As you can see that Rx and Ry and Rz along the three directions. So EGDR centered energy is inversely proportional to 1 by R. So if this prolate nucleus is rotating about either x-axis or y-axis, then as EGDR is proportional to 1 by R, they will have some lower energy component for this z-axis component, and Rx and Ry will have two components at higher energy. So these two components will merge here. So this is why, therefore, typically we will have the two component GDR for a deformed nucleus if we study the GDR built on ground states or excited states. Now, if this nucleus is rotating beyond that critical angular momentum, where that Coriolis splitting, Coriolis effect is important. So what happens? The GDR vibrations, which are perpendicular to the rotational axis, that will split into two component. So details are discussing this reference. So this component will split into two components, and this one of these two component, one of these component will split into two components, and one is parallel to the symmetry axis, rotational axis. So we cannot see that rotational effect if the rotation is parallel to the symmetry axis. So therefore, you can see that there is after splitting, there is a low energy sharp component that is near about 10 eV, and this is the width of this low energy peak is very small. This is why this is sharp, and whereas the higher component will have the large width, and it is very difficult to separate this all the peak. And this is why for the Jacobi separations, we'll have this low energy component near 10 eV sharp component is the signature of that nucleus undergoes the Jacobi separations. If it is difficult to understand the signature of Jacobi separations experimentally, then for the time being, I would like to request all of you to please assume that this low energy sharp peak near 10 eV. Why 10 eV? I will explain that near 10 eV is the signature of the Jacobi separations. Okay. So let me show you some experimental data of Jacobi separations. Here, the first one is for 46 titanium. This is done by Professor Adam Mai. So this is the first observation of the Jacobi separations, and you can see that this 46 titanium was populated beyond that critical angular momentum, and one the low energy sharp component is observed here. So that means this nucleus undergoes the Jacobi separations. And this same nucleus was investigated by Professor D.R. Chakraborty, who is also audience here in this present conference. And they did this measurement for two different angular momentum. So as you increase the angular momentum, this low energy component is very highly reflected. And this is for the same nucleus, but they have measured this high energy gamma rays by tagging on these evaporation residues. And for another nucleus, this is 47 vanadium. This is from our VCC lab, Kolkata. And this is also populated beyond the critical angular momentum, and clearly a 10 eV sharp component peak is observed. This is the signature of Jacobi transitions. So these three nuclei clearly shows the Jacobi transitions. And this is the very most recent experimental result from our VCC lab, that is for 43 scandium, that is populated by this oxygen plus and aluminum. And clearly, we have also seen we studied for two different angular momentum, 26 H cross and 31 H cross, plus minus some 4 H cross, and this is somewhat same as that for 46 titanium. That if we increase the angular momentum, definitely that Coriolis splitting effect, Coriolis splitting will be more prominent, and therefore we'll have this sharp component is more reflected than that of lower angular momentum. But 26 H cross is also beyond the critical angular momentum. So this all the four nucleus till we have there for these Jacobi shape transition studies, and with the same motivations we have our VCC group has carried out another experiment populating 32 sulfur by 20 neon plus 12 carbon. The initial motivation of this experiment was simply to investigate the Jacobi shape transitions in much more other nucleus, whether this Jacobi shape transition is a universal feature of all the nuclei or not. So the initial motivation for this experiment was simply to study the Jacobi shape transitions. And this is the experimental schematic view of the experimental setup. For this experiment, we have used the large area modular barium fluoride detector array for high energy gamma rays. And this array is basically consists of a 49 barium fluoride detector array, 35 centimeter long and 3.5 centimeter square cross section area, and it is arranged in 7x7 matrix. And to make the angular momentum measurements, we have used the multiplicity filter. This is also made by barium fluoride detector, and it was placed at top and bottom of the scattering chamber. And there's another important parameter, that nuclear luminosity parameter, nuclear luminosity, which has been used in the statistical model calculations while extracting the GDR strength functions from that high energy gamma ray spectrum. So we have also measured this nuclear luminosity parameter by measuring the evaporated neutrons from the compound nucleus. So this is the setup at VCC. And what we have seen that it's very interesting result that though this 32 sulfur nucleus was populated beyond the critical angular momentum, but we cannot see any low energy component, sharp component near 10 eV. So that, and this is quite similar to the GDR strength functions for a simple deformed nuclei. So here you can see that just this experimental data are fitted by two components, okay, for the deformed nucleus by calculating from the deformations. So here the no sharp component near 10 eV is seen here. So that means this 32 sulfur nuclei doesn't undergo the Jacobi shape transitions. This is a very interesting result, and this result strongly motivated us to investigate that why 32 sulfur doesn't show the Jacobi shape even if it was populated beyond the critical angular momentum. So with these motivations, we have, in order to investigate why this 32 sulfur doesn't show the Jacobi shape transitions, we did another two experiments at TIFR Mumbai, populating 31 phosphorus and 28 silicon. So why we have populated 31 phosphorus? Because you know that GTR is a collective property, collective vibration of neutron and protons, right? So if we change one nucleon from 32 sulfur, so it is not expected to have the drastic difference in the GDR line shape in 31 phosphorus and 28 32 sulfur, right? So this is why we have populated this 31 phosphorus nuclei. And 20, why we populate this 20 silicon? Because in different paper we have seen that this 32 sulfur nuclei is having alpha conjugate nuclei. So this is why we have planned that okay, let us also populate another similar kind of alpha conjugate nuclei. So this 28 silicon and 32 sulfur, these are the alpha conjugate or alpha cluster nuclei. So these experiments were performed at TIFR using Linux facility, and the angular momentum populated around J is equal to 22 H cross, which is greater than the critical angular momentum for Jacobi shape transitions. So this is the typical experimental setup for the detector systems. Here we have used the 7 hexagonal close packed barium fluoride detector array, and for the multiplicity for the angular momentum measurements, we have used the BGO multiplicity filter. So let us see, this is the experimental setup here. So let us see the fold distributions and raw high energy gamma ray spectrum. So this is the fold distributions. Fold distributions means that BGO multiplicity filter that will detect the low energy discrete gamma rays in between that particle threshold line and the statistical gamma rays that will mainly carrying the angular momentum informations. And by using some simulations technique, this fold distribution has been converted to the angular distributions to have to calculate what is the angular momentum populated of that nucleus. And for different fold, this is the raw high energy gamma ray spectrum. And looking on this simple high energy gamma ray spectrum, we cannot say anything about the Jacobi separations. This is why this high energy gamma ray spectrum has been compared with the statistical model calculations. And finally, we have seen this is the results for this is the 28 silicon, this is the 31 phosphorus. As you can see here that for 31 phosphorus nuclei, it's clearly a low energy component near 10 eV is clearly observed, and that means this goes the Jacobi shape transitions. Whereas this 28 silicon, somewhat it is similar to whatever we have observed from our VCC group that for 32 sulfur. So this is very interesting results, but we didn't find any at that time. We were trying to find what could be the reason. So the present status is basically that the present scenario is that 32 sulfur and 28 silicon, no Jacobi shapes, it's no low energy sharp component is there, but 31 phosphorus it shows the Jacobi shapes. Okay. So as I already discussed that as GDR is a collective property, the GDR properties of 32 sulfur and 31 phosphorus are expected to be almost same unless there is any drastic difference in those two nuclei. So what could be the difference between these two nuclei? Let us first focus on this 32 sulfur and 28 silicon nuclei. Is there any large difference in cell structure or pairing effect? So let us see. So there is a famous most popular theoretical model, that is thermal shape fluctuation model in this GDR field. And in that model, we can include the cell corrections and calculate the GDR stakes functions, and also without any cell corrections. And as you can see here, that with cell corrections and without cell corrections, this theoretical calculations is almost similar for this 31% weighted silicon. If the cell correction is the responsible, then one should expect the drastic difference between this TSFM line shape. So that is not seen. So cell corrections is not the responsible for the absence of Jacobi shape transitions in 28 silicon as well as the 32 sulfur. So is there any effect on pairing effect? So pairing effect, basically the Professor Dang from Riken, who is also my collaborator, they developed a model, microscopic model for the GDR, that is phonon damping model. And they have shown that the pairing gap could play an important role in describing the GDR line shape. And this is why you have to verify whether this pairing gap can have some effect on the vanishing of Jacobi shape transitions. And we have calculated, actually our collaborator from Dang and Hong from Riken and Vietnam, they have calculated the pairing gap, neutron pairing gap and proton pairing gap as a function of temperature and for different angular momentum. And you can see that for 10 H cross angular momentum, this pairing gap, both the pairing gap vanishes. But our nucleus, which shows the Jacobi shape transitions, that is 28 silicon and 32 sulfur, 31 phosphorus, all these three nuclei are populated at very high temperature and high angular momentum. Temperature was around 2 MeV and angular momentum was around 20 H cross. That means at that high temperature and high angular momentum, pairing gap doesn't have any effect on this. So on these two results, theoretical calculations, we can say that the cell structure and pairing effect are not responsible for the absence of Jacobi shape transitions, Jacobi shapes in 28 silicon and 32 sulfur. Then is there any other effect? Let us see. So this is the total experimental data for different nuclei, and all the nuclei are populated in India. Some of them are populated in VCC. This 47 vanadium, 43 scandium, and 32 sulfur. That are those experimental experiments are done at VCC Kolkata, and rest of others are done at TIFR Mumbai. So what you can see here, the 46 titanium and 47 vanadium. These two nuclei are non-alpha cluster structure, non-alpha conjugate nuclei, right? So, and these two nuclei also are just by one nucleon difference. So as I said that the GDR is a collective property, and both this nucleus shows the Jacobi shape transitions. But if you look on the other two things, that 31 phosphorus and 32 sulfur. So 31 phosphorus, it's a non-alpha cluster structure, but 32 sulfur, it's having an alpha cluster structure, alpha conjugate nuclei. At least this, I have found this many reference which says that this 32 sulfur and 28 silicon is having some alpha conjugate nuclei, alpha cluster structure. So from these experimental observations, just experimental observations for different nuclei, we can speculate that the clustering structure could have an important role for describing the Jacobi shift transitions. So if the clustering could be one of the major and primary reason for the vanishing of Jacobi shift transitions in those alpha cluster nuclei, then how the clustering structure forbids Jacobi shift transitions? It's a very important question. So possible explanation, it's our possible explanations. The signature of Jacobi shape, it's a low energy component near 10 eV in GDR line shapes. So, and that is coming because of the Coriolis splitting of the GDR line shape. So does this clustering structure affect the Coriolis splitting? Let us see. So now I am going to explain our understanding how it forbids the Jacobi transitions. It could be wrong also. Just I am sharing. So and I have taken some crude approximations. Let us take the 28 silicon for this angular momentum. Let us calculate this Coriolis shifts. It's a 2.3 MV. It is close to that. It is not exactly the Coriolis shifts. I have just calculated the rotation frequency. Okay, from that rotation frequency, we have to calculate the Coriolis shift by I have already shown that reference where I have shown the signature of Jacobi shift transitions. So here if we calculate this 28 silicon as a single one body rigid rotator, then what we get, that omega is 2.3 MeV. But if I assume that 28 silicon will have some clustering structure, let us take it's a 16 oxygen plus 12. This is the crude approximation. So it is just touching configurations, because it is very difficult to calculate this effective moment of inertia if it will have a complicated shape. So this is a very crude approximation that I am taking, that if I calculate this I effective or this omega, assuming and this 20 silicon as a two body rigid rotator like 16 oxygen 12 carbon, then what we see that this I effective two body is equal to 2.2. That means this effective moment of inertia is increasing, and thereby this angular frequency that is decreasing from 2.3 MeV to 1 MeV, right? So omega decreases, then Coriolis splitting decreases, and effective excitation energy of our cases for 20 silicon, 32 sulfur, as well as the 31 phosphorus. So that was around 30 MeV, subtracting that rotational energy. And according to EQMD diagram, in this effective excitation energy, there could be many possible for this alpha cluster nuclei for 28 silicon, according to this EQMD diagram. So maybe this 28 silicon could have a different kind of complicated shapes, which decreases because of which the moment of inertia is very large, and this is why this Coriolis splitting, that angular frequency is affected, and thereby this Jacobi low energy splitting, that Coriolis splitting is not there. So this is just could be the possible way how clustering structure forbids the Jacobi shift transitions. But we need to have experimental data for the confirmations whether this clustering structure really playing some role here or not. Now,
time is coming to an end.
Yeah, I'll finish. In addition with the experimental data, this GDR can also be used as a fingerprint of alpha clustering, and this is published in PRL. So I collaborate with that group. They can calculate this GDR strength function by using this extended quantum molecular dynamics calculations. And I have I just collaborate with them, and they have calculated this for our cases for 32 sulfur and 20 silicon. This is the density distributions. They have taken this 16 oxygen plus 12 carbon, different initial configurations like carbon as a triangle and linear, and 16 oxygen as a square and tetrahedral, like that. So there are different permutation combinations. They have taken the initial configurations, and they have shown that they got some exotic configurations, that linear chain and the toroidal configurations of the final system. So I'm not able to explain details about this theoretical result. If you are interested, then you can send me an mail. So I'll be happy to inform all these things regarding this. So I'll show you the result. So this is the EQMD result, GDR line shape for the EQMD results. Here we can see that if we use this 32 sulfur and 28 silicon as a toroidal configurations, final system, compound systems, okay, then it can explain that GDR line shapes nicely, and this reasonable agreement between this experimental data and the EQMD calculations indicates the existence of the clustering structure at such high T and J, and especially this peak around this 25 MeV is a strong indication of the existence of alpha clustering that is not predicted within the mean field calculations like thermal safe fluctuation model calculations. So these results shows, at present we have that theoretical support, theoretical calculations, what we are saying, but this is the paper recently published in Physical Review, say Rapid Communications, and this present results highlights that the role of alpha cluster states above this decay threshold, which is still an open field of investigations. And at present, so we have this theoretical support, but we are expecting to have some more data on these Jacobi separations for the more 2 or 3 alpha cluster nuclei, and then only we can say something about that how this clustering structure is forbids the Jacobi transitions. So I would like to thank my collaborator, VCC collaborator, TIFR and BRC, and from Riken, Vietnam, and I would like to give a special thanks to MS Samson Wang, because that theoretical EQMD calculations it took, most of the calculation is done by their PhD student, and it took almost 2 years to do the calculations, because there are different initial configurations. They are playing with different initial configurations, final configurations, and coming to some conclusions. And some questions, specific question and speculations that is going in my mind on these results that I would like to share. And I would be happy if you could comment, or your suggestions are welcome. Please send me on these theoretical results, what we are speculating or we are saying, to my email ID. So the questions which are going in my mind is that does this clustering structure restrain the Jacobi transitions? So we need to have some experimental data for 2 or 3 nuclei. According to EQMD diagram, these alpha cluster excited states are expected to near the decay threshold for individual Z nuclei. What would be the fate of the alpha cluster nuclei for excitation energy above and far away from the decay threshold? If the higher excitation energy combines with the high spin, then whether cluster structures are free. And this is important because if the nuclei fuse together at that high temperature where the cluster structure exists above the decay threshold, and still the clustering structure playing the important role in the formation of the nuclear structure, then during the decay from the excited state to new combination of daughters may be created, and this could be modified the cluster nuclear synthesis diagram or the EQMD diagram at higher threshold energy. So I could be wrong, but this is just I would like to share with all of you. So if you have some comments, please send me to my mail. I'll be very happy. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for this thought-provoking talk. Unfortunately, the time is now very progressed, and we cannot have a longer discussion about which role alpha particles will, or alpha clustering or other clustering contributes. I would say please do this later in the coffee break, or contact Dr. Dey directly, because I think it's very unpolite at the moment towards the following speaker. So I would accept one question if it is urgent, so please feel free to unmute, but no longer discussion, please. Okay, there's one suggestion in the chat, but I would say this can then done together. And with this, I would like to say thank you again to Dr. Dey.
Thank you.
And move on to the last talk in our session, which would be